Welcome to episode 8 of our weekly guitar hang. We had to take the last week off because I was on tour. I got busy. So I've got stories, but let's hear yours first. Welcome, Nick.
Hi Warren, how are you?
I'm good, man.
Good. Yeah, what's been happening? It's been 2 weeks, hasn't it? I played a solo gig on Saturday, which I don't normally do. It was quite an unusual one. These people got me to play background music, and they'd come to all my Hashigo gigs that I do. They're big fans of the music, so it was like pretty cool. But they said, "Oh, can you come and play background for this birthday party?" And I thought, "Okay, yeah, sure, I can come and do that." So I could play whatever I wanted. So I started like injecting all these stupid songs to see if they'd notice. I got away with "Sweet Child of Mine" as a jazz ballad. I played Hotel California. I played "Shook Me All Night Long," AC/DC, all these. They didn't notice. Like nobody batted an eyelid. So I was like, it was funny. But partway through one of the guy's birthday it was, his kid came over to me and he said, "Oh, do you think you could play that Eminem song? You know, the..." However it goes, whatever it is. Because apparently this guy used to be the president of the National Party, and Eminem sued this guy for using his song. I don't know if you remember that happening. So there I was playing for this guy's birthday. I had no idea. I didn't know who he was. He was just some random dude that turned up. So, of course, we played that, and the kids started busting into the rap, and and the father was going, "Oh," like, yeah. And then the week before that, I had 4 gigs booked that weekend, and 3 of them got cancelled, and I was going, "Oh, damn," but a last-minute one came in, so it was all right.
Nice.
I did a duo with my friend Greer Perenara, great singer, really lovely singer, and we played 3 sets, actually, of just guitar and vocal, and that went really well.
Did you have to resort to using the looper for that duo gig?
I did on about 2 or 3 songs, because there were a couple of them where she was like, "Oh, yeah, stretch out if you want," and I was like, "Yeah, go on, why not?" But most of it I just tried to man up and just play, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
See what I could do. And the other one was a jazz quartet gig, which was really unusual. It was led by a female saxophone player, but there was female saxophone player, female bass player, female drummer, dude playing guitar. And I was like, man, that's a sign of the times, isn't it? You'd never have seen that even 10 years ago. So it was pretty cool. The vibe was totally different than a bunch of dudes in a band, you know what I mean? And they played great, so it was fun. You know, we just played standard, so it was pretty easy for a wedding type thing.
Sweet.
So, yeah. So tell us about your tour. Well, you've been off having adventures.
Yeah, well, so I was off with these artists, Vishal and Sheykhar from Bollywood. And we had 3 gigs in Australia. We had Sydney, Adelaide, and Perth. So I flew into Sydney. That went off well. It was in one of those Hillsong venues. You know what those are?
Yeah, the churches, right?
Yeah, church music things. So it was kind of not the best venue for a loud Bollywood gig because I think they're designed to be a bit more, you know.
But aren't those like massive, big stadium type events?
Well, it was kind of like maybe a 2,000-seat arena kind of thing, but
so fairly big for a, you know.
Yeah, exactly. One of those bigger style churches, but it was still a little, you know. I don't think it handled the volume too well, to be honest.
Well, they never think about acoustics in any of those venues, do they?
Exactly. So anyway, so the first gig I got to dual rectors. So all the gigs, like I was saying, I was just going to front of house via that aux stomp from the HX, but I was just using the amps behind, which actually did make a difference, I have to say. You know, and the second gig there were again 2 dual rectors. The third gig there was supposed to be 2 JCM 2000s in Perth, but they sent me 2 JCM 800s from the 80s, which don't have an effects loop. So that was a bit of a challenge. So I resorted to plugging into the low gain input, which is kind of clean. And you got to set the gain knob slightly on the higher side because I think the bright caps, you know, make things a bit sizzly if you turn that gain down. So I kind of set that almost like around 9 or 10. And I just, what I did is I dropped the sends from the HX. So I wasn't.
There's a trick you can do to that if you have to. There's this guy. Do you know this guy Roche who lives in Los Angeles? He builds rigs for famous guitar players. Like he does programming for Fractal for Steve Vai and you know that the highest level. But he had this trick that he showed about if you ever have to plug into the front of the amp with your modeler. Turn the treble off, the bass off, and the mids up on full.
Apparently that defeats the tone stack, but I tried the treble off. Mids were kind of like maybe 8 or something, but the bass I had to just bring it up to around 3 or 4 to where it filled out the low
Yep.
end a bit. But just dropping the send from the HX, it kind of made the amp run pretty clean. So it wasn't like I was struggling the whole evening, and the in-ear sounded the usual. It just like having the amps behind, and that was
Hmm.
like a civic center kind of a scenario. I think it was like called the Riverside Theater. But I kind of like the vibe in Adelaide the most, to be honest. I mean, apart from the heat, it was 40 degrees when we got out of the airport. But
Wow.
very chilled out. It kind of reminded me of a more chilled out Auckland, if that
Yeah,
thing is
yeah.
possible. And
But that's 40 degrees Celsius,
yeah,
not Fahrenheit
not
for those listening.
Fahrenheit.
So
No,
what's
yeah.
that Fahrenheit? About 100?
Nah, God, horrible.
Like horrible. Yeah.
Kind of reminded me of like Delhi in the summer or like Dubai or something like that. I was like, shit, this is Australia. But yeah, that's global warming from you. So yeah, man, that was cool. And then the following week, we played Auckland at the Trust Stadium, which is very close to my house. So for that, I was very tempted to take the Soldano. So I took the Soldano and the 2x12 Marshall cab. And
Nice.
on most of the hits, I did use a Soldano. I don't know if I think I may have spoken about them, but that yeah, it worked perfectly. So I took the line out from the Soldano, which is like from the speaker, you kind of it taps the signal down. I just ran that into the aux and sent that to front of house. And I asked
Oh,
the engineer after the show because he had been on the other three gigs as well. I said, "Did you notice a difference on this one?"
excuse me.
And he said, "Yep, I totally did. It like just occupied like the correct amount of space. It sounded super clear, and I didn't really have to do much to it. So
Wow.
yeah, he was a bit stoked with that.
Yeah, I mean, home gigs, having your own gear is such a treat, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Whenever you're on the road, it's one of the reasons I've kind of largely switched over to the modeler. Is I'm just backline. It sucks, as you know.
hmm
Um, Sometimes you get amps that don't work. I mean, I turned up to one gig and they had one of those Fender Champion amps, little practice amp, maybe 5 watt solid state, and I was like, "What do you want me to do with this?" Like, this, I don't stand a chance against the drummer
yeah,
in this
true.
band. And I've had Fender Twins. I had one Fender Twin that had no bottom end. It was just like the bass frequencies were all gone. It was all mid range. It just sounded dreadful. So what I ended up doing with that was just turning it up on full and then writing my volume.
Yeah, sometimes I think on the Twins especially, they swap the speaker leads on one of the speakers, and then you have two speakers which are out of phase.
I think that's what had
So
happened. Yeah.
yeah, so it's worthwhile just flipping on one speaker and see if that helps.
I
Or
had no choice. I got there
yeah,
5 minutes before the
before.
gig, plug in, and I had to
Yeah,
go. And I was like, "That's because someone picked us up to take us to the gig." It was one of
yeah,
those scenarios, and they left it to the last minute, thinking, "Oh, you just walk in and play."
yeah,
Yeah, but yeah,
yeah,
is
true.
what it is.
Yeah,
Oh, that sounds awesome, man.
yeah.
Sounds like you had a good time.
It was, yeah. I'm kind of, glad that I got to play, a decent sized venue with a cranked tube amp after a very long time.
It's just better, isn't it? I mean, as much as I love the modeler thing, it's like
Yeah,
there's something special. Like I did the same with my bassman the other day. I had a student round, and he goes, "What's that over there in the corner?" I said, "Oh, it's my Victoria bassman." And I said, "Have you ever heard one like crank, like dimed out?" And he looked at me and he went, "No, I haven't." I was like, "Well, guess what?"
today's your lucky
So
day.
we plugged his Strat into it. I turned it up to 7 or 8,
Yeah.
and I did the Greg Koch thing, where he uh, you turn the treble off, the mids at about halfway,
hmm
and the bass virtually off as well.
Okay.
Again, the same sort of principle, but because it's cranked, it's getting all that bottom end from the tubes going, and it's just glorious. And there's so much punch from that amp.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, but I just can't get away with
but what
that.
did what did he have to say about that? Like when he experienced that?
It was totally different than what he thought.
Yeah.
And that's what I always find funny. Like people have this idea of what a bassman sounds like,
hmm
but they've never actually heard one,
Yeah.
right? And this guy's got an HX Stomp, so I said to him, I want you to hear what a real bassman, because I mean those Victorias are as close to the real deal as you can get. You know, point to point, hand wired. He has the same machine that wound the transformers on Fenders in the 50s and 60s. Like he bought it off Fender. You know, he's obsessive about that stuff. That guy. Yeah, and the student was like, "Ooh, actually, I like this."
The funny thing is, like, especially if you're used to playing modelers and having them behave in a very linear fashion, playing a loud tube amp almost becomes like controlling a raging beast, you know?
Yeah,
You have to do the whole volume knob thing, and, like, what noise gate do you use? I use my volume knob,
yeah,
just
yeah,
turn it
exactly.
down,
The noise gate is right there.
pretty much. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is a thing of beauty, but it's also something that you kind of have to learn how to control.
Man, no, that's one thing I find really hard without a volume pedal
Mm-hmm.
for exactly the reason. I don't use a volume pedal so much for swells, although sometimes I do that.
Mm-hmm.
But a volume pedal is really there as a noise gate. Like I got to ride it
Yep.
as soon as the song's finished, bang off with it. So there's no, although this guitar has noiseless pickups. I've got
Okay.
Damasio areas and those two, which are noiseless single coils, and that one is a Mr. Glynn
Mm-hmm.
Integrity plus 5%. But because they're noiseless single coils, I don't have to worry anymore so much with this guitar.
Oh yeah.
Like, see, dead quiet.
Yeah. Ah, that's cool.
In fact, the humbucker is actually noisier. Yeah. Just in this guitar, I prefer real single coils,
Yeah.
but it's one of
You
those
know why
things. Yeah.
the humbucker is noisier, right? Because the coil is actually sensing a wider area, whereas
True.
in your single coil is just stacked, so they've got exactly the same footprint, which is why the hum cancelling is like 100% or close to it.
Yep. And I mean, when I say the humbucker is noisier, it's like
Yeah,
there's
minimally. You can just
minimal
yeah.
noise. You know, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, I can
Oh,
kind of hear
cool.
it when I shut off that half coil thing. You can hear like a little bit of the noise, creeps in
Yeah.
because it's not totally hum canceling. So yeah,
Have you ever tried that Sir thing where the back plate becomes the
I've got a friend who's got a Strat with that, but the earlier one, the Illich system.
right,
I think
which is the better one, I think, isn't it?
I'm not sure because I think Sir in V2 they moved on from the Illich thing. Maybe their what do you call it, the license or something may have expired, and then they came up with their own thing. I think that coils inside the actual pickguard because that doesn't come as a like a something that you can install onto another guitar. It has to be done at the time of manufacture. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you? But did it work? Like, did it?
Yeah, I mean he had it on a switch, so you could put it on and off, and it was obviously way quieter with the thing on.
But did it change the tone when you put it in or
Not
not?
through my ears. I mean, I'm sure there's like minimal, if you recorded it and you heard it back, you may have be, but like just in terms of like the way at least it felt, it didn't really. I mean, you just didn't hear the noise.
Yeah. That's one of the big things of these. These are the best noises single coils I've tried, and I've tried just about
Yeah.
all of them at the Damasio areas. But yeah, I was curious about that Sir thing because you can pretty much use it on any pickup, right?
Yeah, here's a neat trick, but like especially if you're recording and you've got a noisy thing. So you always record a dry guitar signal without any, reverb or delay on it, and then you can use that to trigger the reverb and delay later. So what happens is like when the moment your note ends, you can cut it short, like we're editing, or you just fade it out really quickly, and then the reverb and the delay hang. It covers that. So, you can either have it on a separate track or you can apply it, after recording. But that's like definitely one way. Because otherwise, if it's printed, the reverb's printed, you'll hear the and then you have to wait for the,
Reverb
reverb
tail, yeah.
to fade out before you can actually cancel that noise out.
Yeah, I've definitely done that before where I've gone through and manually cut notes to be able to do that
Yeah.
if I've had to. And more so with singers than anything else. You have a singer who's got some music on their stand and they're shuffling it while they're singing and so you go through and you wait till the note ends, you cut it hard on the end of it. And then of course the reverb decays over to fill it out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The-
Usually amateur singers, I hate to say. The good ones know just leave the paper alone when you're singing.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, totally. Or even when you're, talking in your recording guitar where your amp's in the room, you're gonna have to wait for the guitar to fade out before you start talking again. because you're
Yeah, exactly.
going between mics.
Man, I've seen so many people do that. They kind of ruin a take. You get to the end, you hold the last chord, and then someone goes, "All right, we're ready to go now," and you're like, "The note's still ringing, you moron." you know, seen that
Yeah.
many times. You got any gigs this weekend? Are you playing, or is the
This
show finished now?
No, I think because before the Auckland show, I had two other gigs as well. One was with Ben at that place we normally play, and then the other night was with Catherine Tunks as well. So I had kind of like three gigs in 3 nights, which was a bit unusual, but yeah, that was cool.
You must
But
be feeling tired after all that because traveling's hard
oh
too, right?
well, see what's coming up at the end of the month. I think I have got a gig in Delhi, so I probably have to fly out on the Thursday before Good Friday, land in on the Friday, play the gig, and fly out on the Saturday, come back to Auckland.
Oh man, that's brutal.
Yeah,
And
but
that's a lot. How many hours to get there?
so I think it's via Melbourne, so like 3 and 3.5 or whatever to Melbourne, and then from Melbourne to Delhi is around 12 hours.
Brutal.
There is a
It's
direct flight
basically
there.
like flying to LA from
Kind
here,
of,
isn't it?
yeah, kind
Yeah,
of
about
like
that
that.
distance. But you've got that first leg to Melbourne, so
Yeah, and 12 hours on that flight, I think, most of it I'm probably going to be sleep, and then, catch up on my guitar magazine or YouTube. Watch
yeah,
it.
yeah,
I'll just pre-save a bunch of stuff to the iPad and, watch it in flight.
yeah. I find I just watch movies. I'm like, the last thing I want is guitar. I always say to myself, I'm going to get all this stuff done while I'm on the
Yeah.
plane, and I never
The
ever do.
funny thing is I said that and then I ended up watching like Spinal Tap or something.
Yeah, yeah,
You come back to it in some way or the other.
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. And did you have any problems with checking your gear or that? You had that new
Oh
case
yeah,
that you
so
showed
yeah.
the viewers last time.
Yeah, so when I got to Sydney, I landed like, almost midnight at the hotel. And then I went to just open the pedalboard case to make sure it was okay. And the bloody thing wouldn't open. So I thought, oh shit, these guys have damaged the case anyway. I'm going to go sleep and, I'll figure out in the morning. What I didn't realize, it's got that airtight vent. So then, once that airlock released by morning, I was able to open it again. So all I
What
didn't
do you mean the air?
it's
Yeah.
it's got some kind of a valve that locks it, like it makes it airtight. So like if it's submerged
Oh,
in water, for example, there's nothing that comes in.
oh, right.
So, yeah, so
That's cool.
I just had to like release that, and then it was fine. So then I kept it
Oh,
open for the other flights, and then there was no issue. The guitars thankfully traveled okay. Everything had air tags, like zero complaints about the baggage and stuff like that. The only thing is, I think like the pedal board, like when they bump it, maybe one or two of the velcro, not the velcro, the dual lock that comes out. So you just have to like put it back, because it must be like getting a hard shock, so then the thing just, which is
yeah.
kind of weird. You can just imagine like with dual lock coming out, how hard they must be bumping that stuff.
Oh man, they just chuck stuff off the plane. They don't give a
Yeah,
shit.
yeah, brutal.
I always with my pedals I actually velcro them or dual lock down, but I also put a cable tie
Ah,
around all
yeah.
the pedals as well. And I know it looks really bad, but I'm like, I don't care what it looks like. It's like because all the problems I find with pedals is once something moves.
Yeah.
If it stays still, I don't have any issue. And it usually what it is if a pedal comes loose in the case, I found it'll yank on the cable
Yep.
in the process, and then that's the cable that will die
Yeah,
later on down the track.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I'm thinking actually, because I haven't really changed the layout of this pedal board for maybe like 3 years now, so I'm pretty set with them. You get those bicycle chain links, so you just put one end of the link on your pedal board screw, take it out and put it back, and the other end
Screw it
you
in.
just drill a hole in the thing and. So I'm
Yep.
thinking of doing that, just like bam, it's like Loctite. in there.
Just use cable ties. The thing with the cable
Yeah,
ties, you can just cut them off and
but I
they
don't
don't
like
leave a hole in your.
I don't like how they look.
Yeah, no, they look crappy. I know. You're all about the looks, man. You got to look good on.
If you don't have a good looking pedal board, what's the point of having one? Do you like those pedal boards where like everything's like slightly, at all weird angles, and there's like loops of like Eric Johnson's pedal board?
Yeah, my friend Ben Shepherd used to do that for a long time. He used to. He'd take his pedals out of a backpack
Oh, yeah.
and then he'd put them on the floor and he'd plug leads in and he'd do. And I was like, dude, why don't you just put them into a board? And he goes, They fit in my backpack better like this, you know. But he has to set them up every single time. And he'd have like 8 to 10 pedals, and it'd take him a half an hour, and he'd be sitting there on his knees. And invariably he'd plug something in the wrong way or done something. But he'd do it every time. It used to drive me nuts. I'm like, dude, just put them on a pedal board.
Well, at least your friend had a backpack. I've seen this picture of Hendrix showing up to a gig. He's got all his pedals like this.
My guitar teacher, when I was at college, used to have one of those little plastic crates that just filled with pedals. And of course, they're all sitting on top of each other. None of them were in boxes. So they were chipping each other and scratching. And he'd take one out. And of course, the knob had gotten smashed in his crate. It was so bad. But nobody had pedal boards back then. You know, it just wasn't even a thing. You know?
Totally.
One of the best solutions I ever saw was Mark Lettieri had he had one of those laptop bags.
Okay.
You know, the ones that you can take on the plane, and it was like a roller bag with the handle extends out so you can roll your laptop behind you. Mm-hmm. And inside it, he had taken a plastic, plastic chopping board from kitchen chopping board, and he cut it to be the exact size that would fit in this laptop carry-on case, and then he put his pedals in there, and, you know, that was his way of doing it. I thought that was pretty smart because, I mean, those plastic chopping boards are really hard, but they're like this thick and small, and he would just drill holes in them and then drill the pedals in, and you know, that was a pretty good way of doing it.
Here's something interesting. So I'm just gonna go through a couple of YouTube videos that I've been watching during the week. The one
we've got a question here too, so we should answer that.
Yeah, sure.
But you go first.
Okay, so I was just catching up on this YouTube channel called Session Stories, and they have a nice interview with Dan Huff. So for those who don't know, Dan Huff was like, you know, probably the guy who took over from like Steve Lukather and Michael Landau as like the next, you know, great LA session guitar player. I think late 80s, early 90s. And he played one of my favorite guitar solos on this Whitesnake song called Here I Go Again, the third version, which is like the greatest hits version. And that solo always struck me as like there's the right amount of attitude, but like supremely melodic. So that interview was cool. Then the usual Tom Bukovac channel. There's an interesting one I saw with Paul Davids with Jacob Collier talking about his 5-string guitar and like how his tunings and stuff like that.
Oh man, I so wanted to comment on that one. I saw it. He said something like Jacob Collier reinvented the guitar, and I was like,
well, that's the usual clickbait, you know.
I know. I was kind of like, reinvent it, maybe, but it was quite an interesting concept. That I watched that one too, and Jacob was saying, well, one thing he likes about the 5 strings is that you've got 5 fingers on your plucking hand.
Exactly.
Because he doesn't use a pick.
Yep.
So it just makes a lot more sense for that. I mean, sure, you've only got 4 fingers on this end that you're playing with, but that actually stuck with me. And I thought, well, if it comes to finger picking, it's perfect now. Like, no matter what you do, each finger's got its own place. Yeah. You know.
Well, Keith Richards was onto the 5-string guitar for like a while now.
Yeah. And Dan Huff's just done a interview with Vertex.
Is that out already?
They've put out a 10-minute teaser, and then the full one's coming out in about a week.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah,
and the 10-minute teaser, he talks about the glory of love. You know, that Peter Cetera's thing.
Yep.
From the Karate Kid. You know, which was when I was a kid, that was one of my favorites. Man, I loved Dan Huff. Did you ever get into Giant?
Yeah, man. I had all the albums, including the live one.
That was some killer guitar playing. Like, he sounded incredible in that band. That was the first time I ever really heard of him. Was my friend said, you should listen to this. And
for those who haven't checked out this song called Turn Back the Night, I love the guitar solo on that one.
And it's funny, isn't it, that people think that Lukather was the king of the 80s and 90s. And, you know, he did do some very big profile sessions in those times. But his session career was only about 3 or 4 years, I think he said.
Probably late 70s, I think, is when he did the most amount of work.
Yeah, and then Toto took off, and they started touring and doing Toto. Yeah. So really the guy that had the biggest impact in that time was Dan Huff.
Yeah, and Landau, of course.
And Landau, yeah. But Dan Huff really was more the I don't know, different kind of.
Yeah, and he humbly admits that he was trying to cop a lot of Lukather's vibe, you know, back then.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
you got to start somewhere. So better still to start at the top, so you can't get any better than that. Um,
And he still did some high profile
yeah,
sessions, or even later on, like he did, that Shania Twain album, "Man, I
yeah,
Feel Like a Woman," and that great guitar solo, and that is Dan Huff,
yep.
and now he's become a producer. But I have to say, as a producer, I don't think I've ever really seen anything that he's produced.
I have in fact, it's so weird. He produced a Megadeth album called Cryptic Writings. That's the first time I heard of Dan Huff as a producer. I was like, oh, he's become a producer now. And apparently, they got him to, play a little bit of guitar on that as well. And I think his dad's an arranger, so he did some string arrangement or something on that
Yeah.
album. But it's a cool album. It's kind of almost like, they kind of got really heavy on the previous albums, and this was kind of a little bit more for pop sensibility, for lack of a better term. But
Mm.
it was quite interesting for a band like them to to collaborate with Dan Huff. And speaking of Nashville session guys, there's a nice Tom Bukovac one about his jazz master, but then he was talking about like what producers are looking for in guitar sounds and the stuff they'll gravitate to, which is not necessarily what he would think would be the
Mm.
perfect sound. They're like thinking more like big picture, whatever. So that was quite educational as always, but that one more than some of the other stuff that he's been putting out recently.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his playing. I knew of him long before he even did the YouTube thing
Mm,
because, he was a prolific session guy, and I sort of always followed the guys that do that. And then but I remember like one time thinking, oh, I'll go and see if he's on Facebook and see if he has a Facebook. Nah, nothing, none of that stuff. And then of course all that lockdown stuff happened, and all of a sudden he's a YouTuber and
mm-hmm.
he's doing all that regularly, and which is pretty smart really, because when you think about it, it's like all the gigs have gone, right? Basically overnight.
Yeah.
And then he obviously plays his ass off, but he's got a captive audience who's home with nothing to do. It's like the perfect time. I mean,
Yeah.
I've only started doing YouTube properly this year,
Mm-hmm.
like at least every day at the moment, but it's interesting. It's like, man, if I'd done it when it'd been lockdown time. But to be honest, I wasn't motivated when all that stuff happened. I just went, oh, maybe there won't be gigs anymore, and this might be the end of it, and
Yeah.
what's the point? And I just thought, it's family time, and look after my daughter and make sure she's okay because she was home with, and I did all the cooking and cleaning and what have you.
Yeah. I started going back and learning all the solos that I'd filed away, saying, oh yeah, I should learn that one day. I never got the time to do that. So I was
Yeah.
pulling out like all the Steely Dan stuff and like relearning some of the stuff that I had learned wrong when I was a kid, just because I didn't have access to. So then like a bunch of these isolated guitar tracks and stuff, I would find them, and that would like make all the difference to like getting it right. It was just like a hobby kind of thing. And then
Mm.
I ended up, doing like a video a day on Instagram. That's what I would do, post them on IGTV at the time. And
Yeah.
then, a bunch of these live sessions. And in between, like the whole lockdown, I ended up moving. So that was a logistical challenge as well. And
Yeah.
thankfully, all the guitars landed here. And that was like when I actually realized how much gear had accumulated over the years, and like they just started like coming through in boxes. And luckily at that time, I think the prices on used gear was like way high because of the whole COVID boom happening.
Mm.
So I managed to sell like a bunch of stuff, and now like looking back, I was like, shit, I actually got a bit of money for all that stuff. And now like the prices of used gear, like you're kind of hard pressed to sell stuff at times, especially now.
Yeah, well, people don't have spare money now,
Yeah,
right? And the first thing they cut back on is buying the guitar that they probably think that they're not sure if they need or not.
pretty much.
Um, yeah. So the question we had here
Yep.
was AMEYAXOXOXO
Mm-hmm.
said uh, there was two. The first question was about setting up live sound, but there was a reply to it, which I had missed. And it says, question for Nick: how would one approach theoretical aspects of playing jazz, of jazz playing? So there's a couple of questions here. I'll start with that one. How would one approach the theoretical aspects of playing jazz? The first thing I would say is try and just learn the music with your ear first, and then explain it afterwards. You know, if you want to play jazz music, then listen to jazz music and learn jazz music. You know, the more tunes you know, the better you're going to play the music. So sit down and try and learn 10 jazz standards and go, I'm going to learn 10 standards. Look up on the internet, see which ones are the most common, like Autumn Leaves or The Girl from Ipanema or whatever, and then go, right, I'm going to learn those 10 songs, one song a week for 10 weeks, and by the end of those 10 weeks, you're going to know them, right? Learn some solos that other people have done.
Yep.
Next part of the question was, what point can one consider playing live? I think when you feel you've got enough material that you want to present to an audience, you know. So really, probably that's going to be about a half an hour to an hour. So that's probably going to be about anywhere from 8 to 10, 12 tunes, something like that. You said, personally, I feel like I don't know enough theory to join an open jam. So what should be my approach to get myself into the field as soon as possible? Okay, so open jam sessions are a different thing than playing a performance. You play a performance, you know what you're going to do. You walk into a jam session, it could be anything. But I couldn't tell you how many jam sessions I've turned up to and somebody's called the blues.
Yeah,
You end up playing a jazz blues, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say blues jam, bro.
Yeah, exactly. So play even if it's a jazz centered jam, there's still going to be some blues. So learn to play some jazz blues tunes.
Yeah.
So like Tenor Madness, you know. You know, that sort of stuff. You know, which has some tricky things in it. Blue Monk. You know, learn those tunes and memorize them, and then learn to play over the chord changes of the blues.
Yeah.
And that's a good starting point for attending a jam session. Maybe go to the jam session 2 or 3 times to see what everyone else is playing.
Yeah.
And make a little list in your phone and go, okay, well, they played this song last week and this song, this song. Sit down and learn those, and maybe take some lessons with a good teacher, and the teacher will get you going on that stuff so that you're ready to, and you'll know when you're ready.
Yeah.
Anything you'd add to that?
It not so much as like, if you do want to learn jazz, make sure you actually like the music, because I know
Yeah.
people who think like it's just like some rite of passage that you have to go through just to be, called a proper musician. But if you don't gravitate to that music and you don't feel it like in here, what's the point of doing that? So then just, go with what you like first and learn to do that well before you know start
Totally agree.
spreading out. And I mean, if you want to play just hard rock, for example, play hard rock and become a great hard rock player if that's where your heart's at.
We used to have that a lot with the university when I taught there. Was you'd have people come who they were into Fat Freddy's Drop or those sort of bands, and they knew they'd all gone through jazz school, so they thought, well, my path to playing in those sort of things is I've got to learn jazz first. And you could tell they just weren't into the music,
Yeah.
and it's torture, isn't it? It's hard work. Whereas if you actually like it, or at least like some of it,
Yeah.
and that's the crazy thing with jazz is a lot of times I find people say, oh, I don't like jazz. And you go, oh, okay, all right. But I really like Scott Henderson.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Well, then you do like a form of jazz, right? Or I don't like jazz, but I like this, I like that, I like whatever, it's such a broad topic.
It is, totally. I mean, and not
Grant Green to Wes Montgomery to George Benson. Sometimes they'll like George Benson, but say they don't like jazz. And I'm like, well, George Benson is a jazz musician. Jazz pop, but...
Yeah, I mean, I got into it because of Steely Dan. I wanted to know what those chords were and, like, how to play over them. And that's kind of what got me into it. I mean, otherwise, like, my dad would listen to stuff, like, from the earlier era, like Duke Ellington or whatever. And then that's the stuff I liked, It's just that when it becomes too cerebral and you're thinking too much and, it just becomes a whole exercise to show off how skilled you are, then the music, I think, tends to suffer. So as long as it's got spirit and a vibe to it,
It's funny you say that, though, because that happens in jazz a bit, doesn't it? Where that ego, trying to show how clever you are. I always remember going to a workshop of John Abercrombie and Jack DeJohnette, and some smarter student was trying to show off how smart he was, and he said to Jack DeJohnette, one of the greatest jazz drummers ever, he said to him, oh, in the middle of your drum solo there at bar number 7 of the rah rah, you did this, this, and this, and what were you thinking when you did that? And Jack goes, did I? That was his response.
Yeah.
He's not academically thinking about it. He's playing. You know what I mean? It's like, Yeah, and that happens in the rock world too. Like, you see rock guys who like just gonna shred, or a certain guitar player that I've been checking out for a while now. Really amazing legato playing, but man, a minute into every solo comes the legato, and you're like, it becomes a trick to show everybody how
Yeah, and
clever
quite
they are, and
predictable
it's
at that.
very much
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
I
No, I agree. I agree totally. If you don't feel it, or you can't find something, you think it's a good idea.
yeah.
It almost always
Or
is.
because someone else told you that's what you have to do. Don't let just you let your heart tell you, I guess. That's the best thing to listen to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Because there's tens of dollars to be made in the jazz world. So if you're not doing it because you love it,
Yeah.
why are you doing it? You ain't getting any money.
Yeah. You know that old joke, right? What's the difference between a pop player and a jazz player? The
Yep.
the pop player plays three chords to 10,000 people, and the
10,000
jazz
people.
player plays 10,000 chords to three people.
I always remember my friend
Yeah.
Bruce Foreman saying one time, he goes, "Oh, I'm posting on Instagram every day, and I built somewhat of an audience." He goes, "But nearly 20,000." He goes, he goes, which is extremely high for a jazz musician. And I thought, yeah, it kind of is, because it's a complex art form that's an underground thing. I get it.
Yeah. Like even on this Bollywood gig, which is like as pop oriented as it gets, it's all about getting people moving and dancing and everything. Like for me, the main thing I have to think about is just staying like locked to the groove. And that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, especially like they'll have a bit where the groove's going on, and then there's like a break, and then there's this weird percussion fill, like, and it comes back in on the one. So just like landing back on the one sometimes, can be challenging. Just not get thrown off by anything in between. So,
Yeah, man. I played with this drummer, this American drummer who was over here, Tyrion Gully. That was the time I was playing that Fender Twin that wasn't working properly. Right. I finished my gig, and my gig finished at 12:30, and Tyrion's gig started at 12:30. So what I did was I left my guitar there, my pedals and stuff, and then I did my gig with the stuff, and I finished this last song. Guitar goes down, and I had a student pack it all up for me. We ran over there, picked up the next guitar to go. Right. That's why I couldn't try that amp. I remembered where it was now. And then it was funny. He was like, he played all these crazy ass drum fills that, man, that guy's like, he's by far the scariest drummer I've ever played with. Like, way scarier than Dave Weckl, way scarier than Steve Smith. Any of those guys. This dude is like freakish.
yeah.
But and he said in the set break, he goes, when it comes to all those breaks and hits and things, he goes, don't listen to me, tap your foot.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, because he plays groups of sevens and nines, and they're all broken and they're all over the place, and then he'll always come back in and go, smack, there's the one.
Yeah.
But you're like, that's not where I thought it was. And it was a real lesson.
Yeah.
It was great fun. The dude's a monster, so I was like, yeah.
Yeah, there was this one drummer who said, like, don't expect me to be the timekeeper. If you want a timekeeper, buy a metronome.
Yeah, I like that. You know what I mean? There's nothing worse than someone going, this is where it is, and you'll play to my time.
Yeah.
That's so unmusical.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it has to happen like that, but to me, it's like, in a jazz group, people think the timekeeper is the drums. It's not. It's the bass.
It's usually the bass, yeah.
Because the bass is playing quarter notes. Gung, 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 gung.
Yeah.
They're the only one really playing quarter notes, so they're really the timekeeper.
Yeah.
And the drums really what I want from a drummer if I'm playing anything jazz related. Not that I really play a lot of jazz gigs these days, but I want the drums to like interact with what I'm doing, and maybe I'll play something, I'll leave a little hole, and the drummer will play a fill in the hole, and then I'll play, and then the bass I want to be the thing that kind of just holds it all together.
I was just watching this drum video today about the genius of Mitch Mitchell, who's one of my favorite drummers of all time, and just like how he and Hendrix would interact rhythmically. They had a few examples of that, and it's pretty enlightening. I mean, I always knew that they were like very simpatico in their sense of rhythm, because sometimes it gets elastic. It's not quite
Yeah.
like on the grid. It'll stretch and it'll get like loose, and then it just all like falling down the stairs and landing on your feet, that kind of a thing. So
That's great.
yeah, and if you actually listen to like Hendrix's like rhythm, like where he puts the notes, and Mitch, it's almost like both of them are like pushing each other constantly, and then that bass is just
But that's
holding
the
it down.
groove, isn't it?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Glenn left a question on my YouTube channel
Oh yeah.
about that, about asking about. And if you're listening, hi Glenn, because he said he listens
Oh yeah.
to these podcasts. But he was saying that when a drummer sits back on a snare, maybe you can help with answering this because I sort of had to think about it a bit. But when a drummer sits back on the snare,
Mm-hmm.
he says, do you adjust your groove to follow where that snare is? Like that might be like
Oh yeah.
but the rest of the groove is like, that sort of like pretty modern sort of way of playing where the snare is way back, but everything else is up. And I said, oh, just make it feel good. That's
Yeah.
all I do in those instances. But I had to think about it. Like, would I go with where but it's the tension between them
Yeah.
sitting back and everyone else staying where it is that makes it feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things to add. Is one, you have to figure out as a guitar player if you're the cart or the horse. If you're the one that's pushing it, and then you can't be, locking in with that late snare, for example. Let them play it, and you play as you should. And the second thing is like this interview I was watching, I think on the Drum Channel. This keyboard player called Greg Matheson, who plays with Abe Laboriel and Mike Landau. He was saying when he did a session with Jeff Porcaro. Porcaro was kind of laying back on the snare a bit, so he started doing that. And Porcaro came to him in the break and says, "You can't do that. It doesn't work when you also lay back. You have to play like on the groove and let me do that." So, it's kind of like a case by case basis. Sometimes I almost like prefer the drummer to push a little bit and I'll, pull back,
Yeah.
for example, or depending upon also where the bass player puts the,
There's a
how,
degree of trust that has to
yeah,
happen, isn't
yeah,
it? Because you've got to like what you're saying is you've got to trust that the drummer is going to be consistent with where they
yeah,
are, so that you can be consistent with what
with
you're
what you're
doing.
doing. Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and I don't always have that trust. Like there's many gigs I do where the time feels wonky or the drums are like it feels like it's getting, and not in a good way. You know what I mean? And so then I have to become the horse, not the cart
yeah,
at that point. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah.
that's a good way of putting it. The horse. Are you the horse or the cart?
That came from Matt Schofield because I asked him a similar question, about like he's got like an impeccable sense of time. So, I said like, how did you develop that? How do you know when to, push ahead and stuff? So he said, yeah, you just need to know if you're the horse. Everyone can't be the horse and everyone can't be the cart. It doesn't work. Someone's got to be one or the other.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But you've got to be confident in yourself with it too. I think is part of it. I remember playing with Joe LaBarbera, and he, the great jazz drummer, and he had a way of kind of absorbing people's beat.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't matter where you placed it; he'd just kind of absorb it into the groove,
Yeah.
and that was because his internal clock was so strong, and
Yeah.
so
There
therefore,
are drummers
yeah,
like that. Their groove just feels like this big mattress behind you. You can just lean
yeah,
into it, and it's like
so
elastic
good.
enough to like still be strong and supportive. But it's not so like rigid like a wall where you're like you gotta be hurting if you lean into it.
Yeah, totally. That's when it's great, isn't it? Because it's just, I find when I have those scenarios, I just forget about it.
Yeah,
I don't even have to think about groove. It's right there. You know what I mean? Like it should be.
yeah. Like there's a couple of things like even when you're soloing for example, suppose you're playing and you repeat that and then he catches that on the repeat like he's listening to what you're doing rhythmically. Because I do solo pretty rhythmically in that sense. Like it's always like part of what I'm doing. It's
For
it's
sure. Me
it
too.
yeah. So when they lock into those phrases, man, that's like the best thing. It's like yes.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because you can always tell how mature a drummer is by how they lock in with the phrases. I remember playing with this older drummer here, Roger Sellers, who's sadly passed away now, but Roger was probably 70 when I first played with him, I think he was. And I remember like I was throwing all these rhythmic ideas at him and he just wasn't responding at all.
Mhm.
And my first thought was, oh, he's just not hearing what I'm doing. And then I went away and I went, you stupid idiot, to myself, like he hears everything. This guy's like a master, he's been around, And so I thought, well, I'm just going to like I'm just going to play it right down the line. I'm just going to lay it in the pocket.
Mm.
And I remember playing this phrase, and it was something like, ba-doo, ba-doo, da, da, ba-doo, li-doo, da. And he went, 1, 2, 3, smack, ba-doo, doo, ka-doo. And he just put this snare on beat 4
Mm-hmm.
so perfectly. And I went, I said the sentence, and he put the full stop on
Oh,
it,
yeah.
and then we're in. And I remember going, so it's better that he doesn't copy what I do.
Mm-hmm.
It's better that he like answers my question, if you will. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was the thing that I learned out of that, was that going, well, from a drummer, what I really want is I don't want them to play the same. Like if I start playing a whole lot of quarter note triplets, some drummers will kind of catch on that and jump on it.
Yeah.
No. Like sometimes cool, but not all the time. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Show me you're listening by going, like, put the full stop on
Mm-hmm.
a sentence or whatever is required. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, it also like depends upon how much gaps you leave, between your phrases as well. Do you leave them room for them to, answer back and stuff like that? Because if you're just going
Totally.
delete it, there's no room for them to do anything.
Totally. And I always think about that too, because if they don't play anything in there, then it's like the thing is, when I solo,
Mm-hmm.
it's weird to even think of it being my solo, because the last thing I want is me solo. I want I want me
Band
playing and
solo, yeah.
everyone else playing with me,
Yeah.
and contributing to it. Um, I always remember what we were taught with playing rhythm guitar under someone was like, if you're playing with someone and it's kind of not really happening, it's not going anywhere, light a fire underneath them.
Mm.
And I always thought that was a good one. Like if it's just not happening, then just make it happen. And like inject something into
Yeah.
it to make it kind of,
Like just
you know.
create a stimulus that they can respond to.
Yeah, totally. And if they're listening, which they should be, then the magic starts happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
And like also when you put your notes with the kick drum, it gives those notes like twice or 10 times the power that it would
Yeah,
have by itself. So you just listening to the kick and then you choosing which notes to play with the kick, or maybe just leave the kick alone, for example, or where to go in tandem with it. That makes a big difference.
but that's a conscious decision, isn't
Yeah,
it? That you just talked about. You hear where the kick is, and you choose to either play on it or off it. And
yeah,
even if you're playing off it, you're still aware where it is.
yeah.
And that's
And
the thing of really
and
listening.
every time like people say, like I think I'm getting into a rut. My playing's a bit too predictable. I think also what's happening is rhythmically it could be a bit too predictable. Not so much like the note choices or whatever. I mean, there's only 12 notes. But like where you start your phrase. And instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, da 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 down, da 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 or whatever, just like leading into it. Once you hit the one, getting out and then coming back and to do a similar thing or whatever. Yeah, those
Yeah.
those sort of things can be quite
What I,
interesting.
what I often do if students come and they say, "Oh, I'm bored of the same old thing," that
Yeah.
I'm doing, the first thing I do is I get them to listen to new music.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, that fixes a lot of things. I always remember I had this student who's now the jazz guitar teacher at the university here in Wellington. He used to be my student, and I remember him. I played him some Jonathan Kreisberg and then that kind of started him off on the path of being really into the modern jazz thing. Jazz, but jazz like Jonathan Kreisberg stuff. I don't know if you've heard him. His stuff is pretty crazy, like 21/8, and but not in a dumb way. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it all just makes perfect sense. But the student got right into that, and then also the other thing I found too is like give them a limit. You go, okay, we're going to play a blues in B flat, but you're only allowed to play open position.
Yeah.
One, two, 1, 2, and they go, I don't know open position, and I'm like, good, play. And then they start having to actually improvise because none of their licks they can't see any of them there anymore. None of their licks are working. They're going, and then they have to try and find something.
Yeah.
Or I give them another limit and I go, okay, you're only allowed to use half notes.
Right.
And when you play a whole solo, nothing but half notes. And then they start doing this and they go, and after about a minute, they start getting bored and they start looking for new things. And next thing you know, they're off on a tangent of playing something they've never thought about before. and that inspires some growth, I've found.
Yeah. So actually, how are we doing for time? We're just checking. Oh,
It's almost 10:30.
yeah. Cool. So, oh yeah,
If people have any questions, write your questions in. I mean, it's been good to have that stuff. So really enjoy
yeah. I just
answering
thought
questions.
I just thought I'd fling a couple of those fantasy rig questions
Oh yeah,
back at you this time. So here's an interesting one. What about the Red Hot Chili Peppers? They've got like a ton of guitar players. So yeah.
I would take a Fender Champ
Uh-huh.
and a Les Paul.
Oh, okay. Something new.
Something that they totally haven't seen before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like something like completely. I mean, because the temptation would be a Strat and a Marshall to be
Yeah.
like Frusciante, right?
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I'd probably go like completely the opposite. Like maybe actually probably a super reverb.
It'd probably
And
do well with a bit of headroom, I think, especially with
yeah,
a
because those
rhythm
guys will play
section like
loud.
that.
They'll play loud, and you're playing big stages.
Yeah.
So and probably maybe a pair of super reverbs and a Les Paul type guitar or 335 or
Yeah, that'll
something.
be cool.
And
I think 335 would be nice, or even like a 330, with the P90s or
yeah,
something. That'll be
actually,
cool.
that'd be a good way to go. Go two, three P. My Porritt Smith was the three P90s,
Uh-huh.
something like that. That's kind of unique and because that's the only P90 guitar I have, and I like P90s. I reckon they're great.
Yeah.
And something like that, and then no pedals. And I'd go right. I just gotta like because the pedal thing's been done in that band, right?
Yeah, true.
Did you see the guy that took over from Frusciante, Josh
Klinghoffer, yeah, he was, I think, the guitar tech or something, and then he became the
He had
guitar
like
player. Yeah.
two pedal boards right around him the whole way, with like about looked like to me like 100 pedals. Maybe not quite 100, but a lot.
Yeah.
And so I'd go like, right, no pedals, different guitar, super reverb, dime it out, and just
Yeah.
take that approach.
Yeah, because the thing is, you'll also have to kind of cover the older stuff as well, and people would kind of expect a certain vibe or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the reason why, because they've just had so many guitar players over the years. And another band like that, how about Thin Lizzy?
Oh, that'd be a harder one. Marshall and a Les Paul
Yeah,
type guitar.
yeah, that's
Great.
one you can't really fuck
You
around
just
with.
got to do it.
Interesting how many great guitar players they had. I mean, apart from
Yeah.
the classic Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson, they had Gary Moore, they had Snowy White, they had John Sykes. I think at one point they had Midge Ure. I don't know how do you pronounce that.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So that they had this guy, the first guitar player. What was his name? Eric Bell. And the funny thing is, like, Thin Lizzy's known for the twin guitar sound and everything, which kind of came with Robertson and Gorham. But if you listen to Whiskey in the Jar, there is a harmony guitar part on that as well.
Ah.
So that kind of predates the whole, classic harmony
So
guitar sound.
I got
as
one
well.
for you.
Oh,
You
yeah.
get the gig with Meatloaf.
Holy shit. I don't know any of his songs. The first thing I'd forget the rig, I'd be learning the songs.
You must know I would do anything
That's
for
the only
love.
one I know. It used
Yeah,
to play on TV all the time.
And you took the words right out of my mouth. You must know that one.
No, I don't actually. No, I'm
Oh.
pretty much like a one song. That's all I
Yeah.
know.
But it's that sort of opera style rock, isn't it?
I think a lot came from that producer, because I think he also did that Total Eclipse of the Heart, which does have a very similar vibe. I was like, why does that sound like Meatloaf? And it turns out it's the same producer.
I'm only looking at it because I've got a set list
Oh, yeah.
for Friday's gig in front of me. And Meatloaf, it took the words right out of my mouth, is on there. Okay, here's another one. Fleetwood Mac, because we're doing Dreams on Friday too.
Oh yeah, Fleetwood
What would you-
Mac, probably a Strat and the Bella and a couple of pedals.
Yeah,
Maybe some.
that'd be a good choice, I reckon.
Yeah, just a drive and some delay and reverb. Probably, just use the HX Stomp, I guess. Put that in front and do a bunch of things.
So here's one more for you, and
yeah?
this is just because I've kind of tentatively been asked to do this gig,
yeah?
and I've kind of been thinking, what am I going to do? We Will Rock You,
Oh, the Queen thing.
the show, yeah.
Man,
Because remember, the show is not the same as it's not just Queen's
yep.
music.
What else is there?
It's like theatre show. you know, I mean, it's all built off Queen's songs,
Uh-huh.
but you know, there's transitional music and all kinds of stuff in shows. So
So maybe I should take that Ibanez guitar of yours and the Axe effects, right?
yeah,
If it's going to be a theater gig.
it pretty much is that right
Yeah.
now. That the those gigs you can't take an amp; you
Man,
just you
I
get
saw
moaned
this
at.
red special pop up on Trade Me for like $700. It was going at the time the auction closed, and I was so tempted to, just
Man, I saw
chuck
one
a
for
bid
like
in.
8 or 9 grand that was going
Oh,
for
that
like on
that's
there for like
that's the high end one. This was like
yeah.
the usual Brian May, Brian May's guitars or whatever. That one apparently is made by some guy in Japan or something, and but I've seen the price come down from 8 to 7 to like I think 6 or something like that. So I don't really
I don't think
think.
it ever sold. I mean, I didn't
No.
see it. Like, I kept my eye on that one just out of curiosity, but I was like, no way I'd ever spend that much.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of which, too, I've been checking out a whole bunch of videos on the Two Rock Classic Reverb Signature.
Okay.
Do you know that amp?
I've seen a couple of pictures and videos of it. Yeah.
I've played through one once and it was freaking fantastic. And I've been thinking, man, I want. There was a company in Auckland that had one for a little while, and I thought, actually, that'd be a really good amp for the Fleetwood Mac gig.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It does that clean and that slight classic rock breakup tone. Because Fleetwood Mac's not really that heavy,
I,
but you could have that forward dumbly kind of tone would work. I think would work really
I
well.
think you could do the gig with your bassman as well, or even
Oh yeah,
your Tweed Deluxe, for example. Just a matter of getting the
the Tweed Deluxe though. The problem with it is you don't get enough
clean
volume,
headroom.
and yeah, they break up too quick. And the other thing too is they're very mid range heavy.
Yeah. Have
You
you
know, which for
tried a
certain things.
Have you tried a 5751 in the first valve position? Because that will kind of chill out the gain a bit. It gives you a
Yeah, I
little bit
have
more
it.
headroom.
Yeah, you do get a bit more headroom, and I've done that with my Bassman.
Yeah.
But no, I should swap them. I haven't tried it in the deluxe, so
I've got some OG 5751, so maybe I should just send you one to try.
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'd be great to try it.
there was a guy getting rid of a whole bunch of them, so he was like, just blowing them out at a good price. I think I bought like 3 or something just to keep. So I'll send you one.
That'd be great. Yeah, choice. Cool, man. Well, I suppose we should sign up, but yeah, unless you've got any more dream rigs you can talk about.
Well, we'll save a couple of those for the next one. And I was thinking that.
Maybe the viewers can give us some
Oh yeah,
suggestions.
for sure. That'll be great.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let us know what you think would be appropriate. Oh, by the way, I've seen this Beatles cover band called the Analogs. So if any of the Beatles nuts in the viewers want to check out some really well done and well produced Beatle covers, check out the Analog. I think they do the whole Abbey Road album at one point. And like as a huge Beatles fan, I was just like, oh yeah, this is good. So it's
Yeah, I heard one like that Roger Fox told me about, and I forget what they were called. I think they were Brazilian,
okay.
some Brazilian guys that played Beatles songs, but they did them all like blues tunes.
Oh, okay.
So most of them were shuffles, and most of them were like, which some of those songs kind of were anyway. Like Can't Buy Me Love actually
Yeah,
works
exactly.
really well as a shuffle,
Yeah.
But yeah, they did it, and they were. Oh, I'll try and if I remember, I'll post. I'll tell you about it next week.
Sweet. Sounds good. So till next week, here's Nick and me signing off. Thanks for watching. See you, Nick. Bye bye.
See you, man. Bye.